Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Lawrence Sprung, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born and then go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about your book. We want to talk about your podcast. We want to talk about what you're working on today and for tomorrow, okay?
Sure.
Thanks for being here, bud.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York.
I love it.
That's where I was born. My dad was a New York City school teacher, and I was born around the corner from the school that he actually went to high school with and taught at. And we were there for a short period of time and then moved north of the city to Rockland County, which is just north of New York City.
How old were you when you moved?
Oh, I was like probably only a couple years old at that
Oh,
point.
okay. So did you
don't
grow up in
remember.
Rockland?
For the most part, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's where I spent the majority of my early childhood was in Rockland County.
There you go. So what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
My childhood's a little bit of a blur, which we'll end up getting into because at the age of 12, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. So,
sorry, man.
things are a little bit of a blur. But the community up there was really awesome, and a lot of my memories start from like when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and really got introduced to the sport of hockey, and
Yeah.
that's where a lot of my memories and still to this day started from and stem from.
Okay, cool. So where'd you go to high school?
Went to high school at a little school called North Rockland High School.
Okay.
Went there for 4 years before moving on to university, and enjoyed my time there. Played hockey while I was there, lacrosse, and I was a fairly good student, which was okay, and enjoyed my time there.
What was your favorite subject in high school?
That's a good question. I mean, does any high school student have a favorite subject? Anything
Actually,
that they
believe it or
like?
not, we've interviewed a few that do. Most of them are recess.
Yeah. Jim,
Like
right?
me.
Yeah, Jim. For me, the subjects that I liked had a tendency to be the ones that came easier to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the ones like math and science, those were clearly things that were easier for me. So I gravitated more towards those just because they were easier.
Gotcha. Did you have a favorite sport?
Hockey.
Yeah.
From the time I was 8, 9 years old, I got the itch, started playing, watching, and I've been a fan and a player ever since. And it's been a huge, many people would say, part of my life.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, because I haven't had that many hockey players on the program, what was your favorite thing about hockey? What was it that you loved the most about it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think my love for it now is different then. I think I was intrigued with, it was one of the only sports that you actually had to learn how to do something before you could play it, right?
Right.
And what I mean by that is you don't have to learn how to walk to play baseball. You don't have
Right.
to learn how to run to play soccer. That's inherent in what you know. But to play hockey, you have to learn how to skate, because if you can't skate, you can't play.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that really intrigued me with the sport. And I would say the second thing was just your normal, sport things, having that camaraderie, the team aspect of things where, basically there are 6 guys on the ice for the most part at any given time, and you're all working together for that common goal. And I think that, at the time it was teaching me things I didn't realize it was teaching me. But as I grew and developed, it was something that really tied me back to the game.
Gotcha. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Wow, that's a great question. I would have to say, my mom, hands down, was
Yeah.
the most influential person in my life. She was somebody that, I always had to speak to. She always supported everything I was doing. Not that my dad didn't. My dad and my mom were a little bit different, but similar at the same time. My dad was a little bit more conservative, straightforward, where my mom was a little bit more, willing to go outside the lines a little bit more, um, willing to test things out. She enjoyed fashion, things like that. So when certain things happened in life that were out of the ordinary, my dad was from a traditional conservative family and my mom had a different perspective. And I think in many ways, her and I were very much alike. And that's why she had such an influence on my life.
That's awesome, dude. So you graduate from high school and you decide to go to college. Where did you go and why?
Well, if you don't mind, Mike,
I don't mind.
rewind. Let's rewind a little bit for
I
a
don't mind at
second,
all.
because before, as I was entering high school, as I mentioned, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, which
Right.
was a very, important and inflection point in my life, because a
Sure.
lot of things changed. Right
Yeah.
at that point, my dad was juggling a lot of balls. He was, like I said, a New York City school teacher. He also had a business on the side. He actually had a side gig before there were side gigs. Um, and then he also taught night school. So he was doing
Wow.
everything he could to keep our family going.
Yeah.
And, her illness just kind of stretched him even thinner,
Yeah.
which, the reason why I'm telling you that part is it'll lead into other things later on that will make sense. So, seeing my mom go through this illness as I was going through the end of my middle school years and then eventually high school, prepared me in a different way than a lot of kids. Because although my dad was there and he did everything he could by all means, because I was playing competitive hockey, there were many times where I was being driven by other families, going away with other families. So it taught me things that I wasn't. That many kids aren't exposed to or used to.
Gotcha.
And, as I was approaching the college decision, and one of the things that was playing a factor into that was, how was I going to perceive or continue playing hockey at a given level? And there were a couple of choices that I was faced with. The hockey path, which, if you don't know, is a crazy one. Most kids do not go straight from high school to college to
Hmm.
play Division 1, even, or even Division 3. They go play junior hockey. I'm
Okay.
going through that right now with my youngest son.
Hmm.
So it was, hey, do I go play junior hockey and try to continue my hockey career, or play Division 3 or some other path? And ultimately, I made the decision that I went to a state university, for really a couple of reasons. One, it was not that far from home. So if I needed or wanted to come home and see the family, specifically my mom, I would be able to do that on a weekend, no problem.
Yeah.
Two, from a financial standpoint, it was the least expensive route of getting a college education, and one which my dad had told me if I went to a state university, basically that bill was covered and I would come out with no debt. And three, I would be able to continue playing hockey, just not at a Division 1 or Division 3. Not that I was capable of playing Division 1, maybe Division 3, but I would do it at a club level, at the university level. So I ultimately ended up going to Binghamton University. And initially, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I started out as a pre-med major, which
Hmm.
is not where I ended up and not where I am today, but started out as a pre-med major, played hockey there while I was going to school there as well.
Was the pre-med thing inspired by your mom?
Actually, no. Ironically, I had a doctor that, from when I was a young kid, a pediatrician,
Hmm.
who really left an indelible mark because I always felt like he was a great guy. He was always available to talk to myself, even though I was a kid. He
Mhm.
always talked to my parents in a really kind fashion. And I really felt like being a pediatrician would be a great thing. Work with kids, help kids, have a good bedside manner and demeanor. And he was somebody that I kind of looked up to, my own physician. And that was really what kind of led me down that path, thinking that that was the direction I wanted to go in.
Isn't it amazing how you meet somebody who just you connect with, like just somebody that is exceptional at what they do, and they reach you. You know, teachers do this all the time, right? So I'm constantly interviewing people that had a teacher that reached them and it inspired them to go this direction versus, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting because unlike a teacher where you see them every day for maybe 180 days out of the year,
yeah,
this guy, maybe I saw him what, 6, 10 times a year when I,
right.
so there had to be something there that
Yeah,
really left a mark that I felt like he was a good guy, really interesting career that stuck with me
yeah. He
because
really
I wasn't
reached you. It's cool.
right. Yeah.
So, okay, so you go into pre-med.
Yeah.
At some point, you decide to change your major. Talk about what happened and talk about why you made that choice.
Yeah, so I think what happened was initially what happened was I got weeded out like everybody else. I was looking at the schoolwork. I started sitting back and thinking intelligently and saying, okay, I have how many more years of this that I have to do school wise? How much money is this going to cost?
Yeah.
How many years until I make an income?
Yeah.
Not for me,
Right. Right.
and I was like, I gotta figure this out quickly. And I figured it out within the first semester of my freshman year.
Wow.
So
Okay.
so thankfully for me, my dad and everybody else, I figured it out very quickly. And I shifted to a math major in that moment because I would have loved to go to the business school, but once you were in the university, it was harder for you to transfer from within than to apply in as a freshman. So I was
I see.
kind of locked out of the business school and basically went down the path of math and took some business courses around the side. And simultaneous to that, as I was trying to think about what would I want to do, what am I going to do
Mhm.
for the rest of my life, there were a couple of things. Number one is some of my friends and I, we were enamored by watching CNBC, in high school, and I think some of that was the markets, and part of that was it was like almost looking at like gambling apps today where kids can go on, which I think is terrible, and place bets on sports. It was almost like a quote unquote gambling kind of environment that interests me. I don't think that and believe that that's the way it is today, but in high school, I wasn't really sure and didn't understand those things. But it interests me.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking about my family and looking at my mom being ill, my dad juggling all these balls that I mentioned earlier, and realizing that he never had a financial advisor. And, I never, by all means, having a financial advisor would not have mitigated anything that my mom was going through or her health situation. But I feel like if he had somebody helping him navigate these things that he was going through in his life, financially and otherwise, that would have been beneficial, that there could have been a lot of value there. And at least, if nothing else, he would have had somebody standing shoulder to shoulder with him, walking him through that process.
Yeah.
And as I started thinking about things, I was like, you know what? I think I want to be a financial advisor to help people like my dad. That was the initial kind of idea. And then as I thought about it more, I was like, it doesn't have to be helping people because they have somebody going through a bad situation. It could be helping people who are looking to retire at a certain age or
Yeah.
buy a vacation home or send their kids to college. And it really stuck and basically started going down that path within the university and making my way towards being a financial advisor at some point, and been doing that ever since.
That's cool. So you graduate with a bachelor's degree in math. Do
Right.
you go on to more schooling, or do you get started in financial advising?
Mike, you remember why I didn't want to be a doctor? Schooling was not in my wheelhouse. I listen, I was I was a good student in high school.
Yeah.
I was not a great student in college, and I think part of that is because I was a little bit immature,
Yeah.
and I think part of that was the facts and circumstances of my life and my mom's illness that I was very distracted. But my goal was to get my degree, get out of school, and start hitting the pavement and working.
Gotcha.
And I did I was somewhat entrepreneurial all along. I guess we kind of glazed over it a little bit. At 12, I had a paper route. I was always doing things that were entrepreneurial in nature, always thinking about ways to be entrepreneurial. So once I got that degree, I knew that, schooling was not something I was going to look to do immediately continuing. I needed to get out in the workforce and start, impacting the world.
Start getting after it. So you
Yeah.
graduate from college. Where do you go to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you ever see the movie The Wolf of Wall Street?
I did. I did. I love that movie.
So, yeah. So the firm I first worked at right out of college was basically an exact replica of that.
No way.
And
So you go to
100%.
work there and then they go broke?
No, they were still in business while I was there. I ended up figuring out what was going on
Oh, it was
while I was.
shady.
Oh, it was, I mean, what you saw on that movie screen which was exactly what was going on in those offices each and every single day.
Wow.
It legitimately, that's the way it was. And
Oh, really?
as somebody coming right out of college, I was like, oh, these guys are making a lot of money. You don't realize you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And within a very short period of time, within a year or so, I started figuring out what was going on. And I was like, oh no,
Yeah.
this is not the way to work with families. It was not what my vision was when I was talking about helping people like my dad. It really was that Wolf of Wall Street environment was really more or less that gambling environment that I
Yeah.
spoke of earlier, which is not what wealth management is really all about.
Exactly. And making lasting change, right?
Correct.
Building a legacy, that kind of thing. So
Well, you can make lasting change in that environment, but it's going to probably be lasting change for the worse, not
yeah,
for the better.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
So you come to a realization as to what's really going on and you make a change. Where do you go and why?
So I was at an impasse, and at this time, had met my wife,
Mhm.
at this point in time, roughly, and we were making a decision. We figured out I can either stay in this environment and look over my shoulder the rest of my life, which I didn't want to do, or
Right.
she said, we got to get you into a large firm where you could start learning how to do things the right way.
Yeah.
So basically, I went down the path, ended up, she was a recruiter, my wife, not in the financial services field, but she helped me secure my first role in a big firm, which was with, at the time, Solomon Smith Barney.
Wow.
At a time where the average age of a new hire at Smith Barney was between 40 to 50 years old because they wanted career changers.
Yeah.
I was a 23-year-old looking for my first role. And at 8 interviews later, I was hired and got my opportunity with Smith Barney.
8 interviews?
8 interviews.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why so many interviews?
Because they didn't really want to hire me, but I had to convince them 8 times that they had to. And
So you just had to keep bringing it.
with 5 different people, just kept asking questions. They really wanted to find a reason not to hire me because, as I said, they were looking to hire people in their 40s and 50s who were coming from another career, had a network that they could go to, a natural network that they could start working with. And at 23 years old, most people don't have that type of network.
I mean, you've seen the movie Pursuit of Happiness.
Yes.
This sounds similar to that,
Very much so.
right? Because he goes in and, I mean, it wasn't one of those things where, they didn't necessarily want to hire him, right? He talks them into it.
Right.
That sounds like this.
Well, if it's not the case, why have 8 interviews? You either know or
Yeah.
you don't, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was an arduous process, but, we got it done, which was
That's
great.
awesome. So how long were you there?
I was there for a couple of years and then moved on to another large bank environment from there. It was, several iterations, but they really gave me the opportunity to, really develop and hone my skills, some of which that I got from the previous firm. Even though I talked about that Wolf of Wall Street type firm in a negative way, there were a lot of positives in terms
Sure.
of learning salesmanship and how to take rejection, making 500 phone calls a day and having 490 hang up on you or say go scratch. It's very humbling and,
Yeah.
gets you prepared for what real life is all about and being able to prepare for that. So we ended up moving to another large firm from there. And then, that ultimately was the end of my large firm environment at that point in time.
Can I ask you a question that I
Sure.
literally have never asked anybody? I think this is awesome. How in the world do you make 500 phone calls in a day and take 490 rejections? How do you do that? Like, talk about that evolution because you don't come out of the womb learning how to take rejection. You're
Yeah.
typically not raised learning how to do that. You've got to grow some pretty thick skin, right?
Yeah, I don't know. So we'd make 500 phone calls a day, and to be fair, maybe we get 100 of those on the phone and
Yeah.
actually talk to them.
Yeah.
And then out of that 10, we'd actually have a conversation with, and maybe one we'd actually get an opportunity to sell. So, you'd get about 99 no's a day. But
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes from. I will tell you, I had some experience in college. When I worked for a brokerage firm as an intern, I got a job selling photo packages during that period of time also. So that kind of was a similar environment and got me used to that. But to me, I don't know, it just never bothered me. If I feel something's right for somebody and it's right for them and it's right for me, then I should be able to ask, and if they say no, then that's okay too. I
Yeah.
don't see any issues with that, and it's just something that's never bothered me too much.
That's cool. That's cool because it bothers a lot of people, right?
Yes.
There are people out there that really battle with this. Like they really have a tough time. What you did every day, they have a tough time doing in a lifetime.
Yeah. Well, listen, I have friends that were at that firm that I started with doing the same thing. And to this day, if we were to get them on this podcast, they would, inevitably tell you that they have PTSD. To this day,
Yeah.
some of them are fearful of even picking up the phone ever and having a conversation because of all those no's.
Yeah.
And they left an indelible mark for them in a different way.
Yeah. It can do some damage. That's for sure. Yeah. I agree
Yeah.
with that. So, so you leave Solomon Smith Barney and you end up going to another, you quoted bank type environment, right?
Right.
How do you end up where you are currently?
Yeah. So what I realized at the bank or in the other large firm that I was in is I am what they call, and I don't know if this is on Wikipedia or even in the dictionary, but I am what you call unemployable. I am not a good employee. I can't be employed. It didn't work. And
I know
what I
that
was
feeling, by the way.
yeah, there you go. There you go. So, I learned while over my time and working with these couple of firms that they all talk about, you know, doing what's in the client's best interests and, making sure that you're there to serve the family. And that was really what the gist was. It wasn't about revenue. But at the end of the day, it was all about revenue.
Yeah.
I never got questions about how many families did you help retire this month,
Yeah.
Larry? How many kids did you help send to college this quarter? It was always, what was your revenue? How do we boost your revenue? How do we boost the revenue for the team? And I remember this vividly. I had one of the last conversations I had with my quote unquote manager at the time. She approached me and said, "Hey, Larry, what can we do to make the team, their revenue increase?" And I said, "Well," I said, "that's an interesting question." I said, "Number one is I don't really care about the team per se, because the team's revenue doesn't affect my revenue.
Right.
It affects your revenue as the manager, but it doesn't affect me. So I said, if you want to ask me what I can do to increase my revenue, I have some thoughts around that. So she said, all right, shoot. And I said, well, I said, last month we had about 30 hours of conference calls and meetings. I said, cut that out. And
Yeah.
I basically get an extra week to work with people.
Yeah.
My revenue will go up. And she
Guaranteed.
looked me, yeah, yeah. And she looked me in the eye and she said, I am never asking you that question again. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
And I said, well, and that to me was the moment that I said, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I have to open up my own firm, and I have to do things in the way that they should be, not the way that we've been seeing them done in the last several years, which was where I was.
Yeah. So I had a firm reach out to me and try to recruit me. And they were bringing both barrels, baby. I mean, they were throwing everything at me, right? And I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to work with you, but no meetings, no corporate junkets, no any of that. I'm not going to be a part of any of that. And they said, okay, thanks. Right?
There you go. Yeah.
Well, you sit in those meetings, you know this, you sit in those meetings and you think about what you could be doing. You think about what you could be doing, like what's over your left shoulder, right? What did you do that brought you joy today? Well, sitting in an all-day seminar that I don't necessarily want to be a part of really isn't that deal, right?
Nope.
Years ago, one of the companies I worked for had a mandatory training on a thing called call reluctance. Okay. They bring everybody in, and it's a mortgage company, and there's 400 loan officers in this room, maybe 5. There might have been 500. And the instructor comes in. We all had to take an assessment before. And the guy comes in and he walks in and he goes, okay, before we get started, is there a Mike Litton here? And I mean, literally, I got these chills.
Right.
I'm not joking, Larry. I'm thinking, I did something wrong. What in the world did I do wrong? Right?
Yeah, sure.
I'm in trouble, right?
Principal syndrome.
Right? I guess I'm going to the vice principal's office, right? And I'm like, I'm here. He goes, you're excused, sir. Excuse me? And all of a sudden, my mind starts racing. I start thinking I'm getting fired, whatever. And so I asked him, I said, may I ask why? And he said, we've never had anybody score on our assessment the way you scored on our assessment. Sir, you don't have any call reluctance, so you're excused.
There you go.
I walked out of there. Do you know how many glares I got from all the other loan officers?
Yeah, sure.
It was crazy, man.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
sounds it.
So mandatory training, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so talk to me about what you're doing now at it's Mitlin, right?
It is
Money
Mitlin.
management. Talk about what you're doing now. Number one, let's talk about how long you've been doing it, right? So how long have you been there?
Yeah. So let me, I'll tell you that. And then I want to
Well,
give you some
go back.
color.
It's fine.
So Mitlin's, we formed in October of 2004. So
Okay.
we're in process. This year will be our
20 years.
20th anniversary.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. We've been in different forms along the way, have had several iterations. And, you asked the name of the company, Mitlin, Mitlin Financial. And the thing that's interesting about that, and I think it's pertinent to this story for your listeners, is one of the biggest questions we get is, where did the Mitlin name come from?
Right.
And MIT was my wife's grandfather, Mitchell. LIN was my mother, who I spoke about earlier, Linda. And when we were thinking about putting a firm together and putting a name together, these two people, crazy thing is, they passed away within literally hours of each other.
Oh my goodness.
And at that time, I didn't know my wife.
Yeah.
We met a couple of months later, and we were reconciling why we were where we were, why we were doing what we were doing. And that's how we met after that. And we met online. This is, a long time ago, before online dating was as prolific, internet was as prolific. So when we were thinking about putting the firm name together, we were like, these two people, obviously I spoke about my mom earlier and how important she was to me and what a figure she was in the community. And my wife's grandfather, same. He was just a really good guy. He wasn't a wealthy guy, but he was the guy that when the ice cream man came down the block, he would buy ice cream for all the kids on the block. So great values, veteran. So we wanted to use their two names for the firm. So that's how we formed it.
That's
And
awesome.
when I talked to you earlier about my mom and the mark she had, that really put family at the forefront for me. It was so important, right? And then about a month before I was supposed to launch Mitlin, which was October 2004, we lost my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, Keith, died by suicide. He had a mental illness, bipolar. And we almost delayed starting the business. But, we went forward because that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And, as a result, side by side with our business, we've become advocates for mental health.
Sure.
And as a result, we've raised about $1.8 million for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Oh, awesome.
And I've sat on their national board and currently sit on their investment and finance committee. So, that was the second iteration for me, because I think this will be pertinent when we talk about the company today and
Yeah.
the growth of it. The second iteration for me that impressed upon me how important family really is and what life is really all about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why I
That's
have that
cool.
sign over my shoulder. What did you do today that
Yeah.
brought you joy?
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. So do you know who Chris Voss is?
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you know that part of his story is he volunteered for the suicide prevention hotline?
I think I did.
It's how he got into hostage negotiation.
Yes, I did know that. Yes.
Great. It's an amazing part of his story. So that's really cool. You guys have a lot in common.
Thank you.
So Midland's been around now almost 20 years, right?
Yes. Yep.
And at some point you make a decision to write a book. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So the book was something that for about 10 years I had on my docket. But, as I mentioned, I was a family guy. My practice, Mitlin, the company, was really a lifestyle practice. And that's the way I wanted it. It afforded me the ability to be at all my kids' hockey games, be at their hockey practices, spend time with my wife. So I never had time. And then about a couple of years ago, my older son went off to college. My younger son at 15 decides to move away and go to boarding school to pursue his dreams of hockey, to play hockey. Moves to Minnesota from New York at 15. And I had a lot more time on my hands.
So
So
you're an empty nester?
yeah, empty nester.
Yeah. Now what are you going to do with yourself?
Yeah, so I had some free time. So I'm like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of hearing these pundits go on TV and talk about investing and financial planning topics and talking about them in a way that everybody should be doing this or everybody should be doing that. And really, I sat down, wrote the book. We launched it and released it April of 2023. And it's been a fantastic event, and it's gaining steam, all the time, the number of sales and the feedback that we're getting about the book.
That's awesome. We'll put a link to your book in your episode description too.
Yeah, and people can get free to the 2 free chapters if they go to financialplanningmadepersonal.com.
Financialplanningmadepersonal.com.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so at some point you decide to start a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that for a second.
So the podcast started before the book. The podcast started in 2020. We're going to be releasing like episode 190, 192 or something like that. Mitlin Money Mindset, where we basically have entrepreneurs, business owners, and talk about their journeys, athletes, many professional athletes, and mental health related topics. And we have some great guests. I love the entrepreneurial journey. I love meeting people and having conversations. And that's where the tagline that you mentioned before, what did you do today that brought you joy, was born from. We ask each of our guests at the end of the show, what did you do today that brought you joy? Because at the end of the day, what I'm doing as a wealth advisor and helping families, it's all about bringing joy and using money as a tool to bring joy to their life, right?
Yeah.
It's not about just accumulating money to accumulate money. It's about accumulating money to bring joy to people's lives.
Yeah. It's so what you're doing is changing people's lives and making them better. And that's a big, big deal, right? And I have the same frustration that you have with financial advisors on television, with real estate professionals on television, right?
Sure.
Because they'll get on TV and they'll complain about the market, but they won't talk about a solution. They won't give anybody a potential way to work around it or a potential way to deal with it, right? They just get on the episode with the anchor, with whoever the host is, and they all just complain about it. And it's like, okay, it just drives me nuts, because it's like I'm literally talking to the television going, you can do this. Here's another option. Here's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's frustrating, man, especially when it's your life's mission. That's a big deal.
Agreed.
So talk to us a little bit about, with the book and the podcast and your company. What are you working on for tomorrow? What's the future look like?
Yeah. So we, like I said before, in terms of the lifestyle practice, we were a lifestyle practice. We are not a lifestyle practice today. About 3 years ago, when my son departed and left the nest and went to boarding school, we saw it as a time now to really increase our ability to have impact. And in the last 3.5 years, we've more than doubled the practice in size, revenue, in every single way. And now we're really focused on 10xing it from here.
Wow.
And we're really implementing a lot of the principles and concepts from Dan Sullivan's 10x is better than 2x. And his who not how philosophy, and working on that. So that's really what the next iteration is really growing the number of advisors, growing the impact on the families that we're serving here locally.
That's awesome, buddy. That's awesome. Well, listen, is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, I love what you're doing here. I love highlighting, people's stories. I think it's great. And I find that your guests, and just like my guests, very interesting. Everybody's unique. Everybody has a different path, and there's so much to learn from each and every one of them. And thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I love this, and I've loved every second of our time together. Thank you again for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. It was great meeting you. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.